Hi guys, and welcome to step 3 of how to 10x your Reels editing in Premiere Pro. So we are now on framing. While this may be a little bit daunting to people, I'm going to show you how simple it can be. And to do that, I'm going to head over to sequence settings, and I'm now going to shift over our sequence to actually vertical video so you can get a better idea of how to frame your subjects vertically. So here our subject is a little askew. This video was originally shot in a 16:9 format without the subject being in the center frame. Now, if you're framing your subject, you don't necessarily have to have them in the center. But when shooting vertical video, you always want to opt for the center because you have so little frame to work with already. In order to ensure proper framing, what you're going to want to do is actually head over to this little plus icon over here, and you're going to select this safe margin section and drag it down to this icon section over here. And you're going to want to go ahead and enable that. And that's basically going to give you the borders and safe margins of your video and give you a better idea of how to center your subject. Now that we have these safe margins enabled, I'm going to drag our subject over to the middle, and she is now perfectly centered. What some individuals do is that they place a eyeline tracker about a quarter to halfway down from the top of their frame so that they could keep framing consistent between shots or between cuts. But you don't necessarily need to do that because you have the safe margins enabled here. What you're going to want to make sure is that the top of the head is consistent between shots. Or if not, you could just place a simple eyeline tracker here or wherever you feel comfortable for adequate framing. Now that we have our subject framed, I'm actually just going to go ahead and nest this clip so that way I can give you guys a simpler and better idea of how to jump cut or how to incrementally increase the scale of your video without it looking dull when you jump in. It's just going to be a little bit more dynamic and punchy when you jump in a more aggressive manner as opposed to jumping in by 10 or 5 scale increments. First of all, you want to make sure that you have your effect controls tab enabled. If you don't, you're going to head over to Window and search for it right here in Effect Controls. Now, when increasing scale between jump cuts, you're going to want to typically increase anywhere between 15 to 30 maximum. This is going to provide a nice dynamic punch to the jump cut, but it's not going to be too aggressive that your audience is going to be annoyed by it necessarily. So let's go ahead and show you the scaling differences to give you a better idea between several. This is what a jump to 115 scale looks like. This is what a jump to 120 scale looks like. This is what a jump to 130 scale looks like. And this is what a jump to 140 scale looks like. So we could already tell that the jump to 140 is very aggressive. And when you're doing multiple dynamic shifts in succession, you want to maintain consistency between these jumps. So we want to do it in a scale of increments. So if you're doing it by 115, then you increase to 130, and then 145, and then 160. If you're increasing by 20, you go to 120, 140, 160. So this is how it would look going from 100 scale to 120 to 140.
And evidence-based insights into the
Now, our subject isn't necessarily adequately framed right here because the side of her face is cut off. That's because we shot in 16:9, and that's why we always suggest to shoot in 9:16, so that way you're shooting for the edit. When shooting in 16:9, you have a tendency to come into contact with some of these framing issues. So shooting in 9:16 typically is a good way of avoiding this whole headache. Primarily, let's start off by addressing some of the elements that you see off to the side here. Motion, position, scale, and rotation. Rotation is only something that you're going to be using if the angle of your frame is a little bit askew, so we're not going to bother with that for today's purposes. But we're going to look at position, and we're going to look at scale. Let's start with position. You have 1080 by 1920. 1080 is your horizontal axis, and 1920 is your vertical axis. And we want to adjust these to keep our subject in the center frame in between these two indicators right here. Now we have scale, which increases the overall scale of your video uniformly. Alternatively, we can deselect uniform scale and adjust these elements independently, but that's not necessary. Now let's head over to step 4, audio.